My son told me I was not fancy enough to attend his housewarming party, and he did not know that I paid for the house. Not contributed to it, not helped with the deposit, not co-signed a loan or gifted a down payment or any of the soft or more partial versions of what I'm about to tell you. I paid for it. The full purchase price of a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house in one of the most sought-after zip codes in our city, paid in full in my name on a deed that had my signature at the bottom and my name at the top, and not a single syllable of his name or his wife's name anywhere on it. I paid for it, because that is what I do. That is what I have always done. I am the kind of mother who finds a way, who has always found a way, and my son had spent so long watching me find a way that he had stopped understanding that the way had a source, that the way was me, that I was the engine of every comfortable thing he had ever stood inside and called his own. He called me on a Thursday evening to tell me about the party. He said it would be his and his wife's social debut in the new house. He said their friends were successful people, people with a certain standard, a certain aesthetic, a certain expectation of the rooms they moved through and the people inside them. He said with the specific gentleness of someone who has decided to be cruel and is trying to do it quietly enough that it doesn't sound like what it is. "Mom, please just stay away. It's not really your kind of thing." Not my kind of thing? The house I purchased? If you are listening to this right now, stay with me, because this story is about more than a party and more than a house. It is about what happens when a child mistakes the generosity of a parent for the absence of power, when the hand that gives becomes invisible because it never demanded to be seen, when a mother who has spent 30 years making herself the background of someone else's life decides quietly, completely, with a very specific piece of paper in her hand, to step into the foreground. And before I go any further, tell me in the comments where you are listening from right now. Are you a parent who has given everything and been made to feel like nothing? Are you someone who has loved so thoroughly that the person you loved forgot to ask where the love was coming from? I read every comment, every single one, because this story belongs to every person who has ever funded a life and been excluded from the party. Stay with me. Let me take you all the way back. My name is Paulette Osei Mensah. I am 61 years old. I was born in Accra, Ghana, the third of 5 children, to a school teacher father and a market trader mother who between them gave me 2 of the most important things a person can receive from their parents: the love of learning and the understanding that money is a tool, not a personality. My father could explain the French Revolution and the causes of the First World War and the poetry of Langston Hughes with equal fluency and equal passion. My mother could calculate her margins in her head while simultaneously negotiating with 3 suppliers and keeping track of which customer owed her what from the previous week. Between the 2 of them, I received an education that no single institution could have provided me. We were not wealthy, but we were never without, and I understood from a young age that this was not an accident. It was the result of deliberate, sustained, unglamorous effort applied every day without complaint and without the expectation of applause. My mother did not trade in the market because she enjoyed it. She traded because the family needed her to, and she was good at it, and she did it with such complete commitment that by the time I was a teenager, her stall had become a small shop, and by the time I left for university in London, her shop had become 2 shops and a supplier relationship that covered half the neighborhood. That is where I come from. That is the woman who made me. I came to England at 22 on a scholarship. Mathematics, University of London, full funding. I worked part-time through my degree because the scholarship covered tuition and not much else. I graduated with a first-class degree and a job offer from a financial services firm and exactly £212 in my bank account and the absolute certainty that I was not going to be in that position for long. Not from arrogance, from the specific conviction of someone who has been watching the right person work hard their entire life and knows what sustained effort produces. I worked in finance for 12 years. I was good at it, not because finance was my passion, but because I understood numbers the way my mother understood margins, intuitively and precisely, and because I had the additional gift of being able to explain things clearly to people who did not understand them, which is a rarer skill in financial services than you might expect, and a considerably more valuable one. I rose, I saved, I invested, not recklessly, not with the high-risk appetite of someone chasing excitement, but carefully and consistently, in the way my mother had taught me that small things compound into large things if you are patient enough and disciplined enough to let them. At 34, I left the firm. I started a financial consulting practice from a spare bedroom with a laptop and a phone and a list of former clients who trusted me enough to follow me from the firm. Within 3 years, it was profitable. Within 6 years, it was significantly profitable. Within 10 years, it was the kind of business that I could run from anywhere, that supported 3 employees and a growing list of clients and a lifestyle that was comfortable without being ostentatious, because I had never learned to be ostentatious, and I had no interest in starting. I also raised a son. Alone, largely. His father left Kofi when he was 4, which is a whole other chapter that I will compress into the single sentence of, he left, I stayed, Kofi was fine, because I made him fine, and the fineness of Kofi was the central project of my adult life for many years. I say this without bitterness and without the performance of martyrdom. It was simply true. He was my child, and I was his parent, and I did what parents do. I provided, I showed up, I worried, I sacrificed things I have not fully enumerated because the enumeration was never the point. The point was Kofi. Kofi grew up comfortable. I want to be precise about this. He grew up in comfort that I created through work that he did not often see. I did not narrate the work to him. I did not invoice him for the school trips or the music lessons or the university fees or the years of everything included. I was not raising him to feel indebted. I was raising him to feel secure, to feel that the world was a place that could be navigated successfully, that resources existed, that possibility was real. I wanted him to have the confidence that comes from never having the ground cold from under him. What I perhaps not adequately taught him was where the ground came from. That is my part in this. I say it directly because I believe in accounting for one's part. I made the security so seamless, so uninterrupted, so apparently effortless that my son grew up understanding himself as someone who simply had things, not as someone whose mother had worked to make things available. The invisibility of my effort was in some ways my own doing. And I have sat with that, turned it over, looked at it from multiple directions. It does not excuse what he did, but it is true, and I am telling you the whole truth.
Kofi is 31 years old. He works in marketing, brand strategy, which is the modern term for helping companies tell the most flattering possible version of their own story, which he is genuinely good at, and which is, now that I think about it, a skill he may have been developing in his personal life as well. He married 3 years ago. His wife's name is Celeste, and Celeste comes from a family that has money the way furniture has age. It is simply there. It has always been there. No one discusses where it came from because the length of its presence has made the origin feel irrelevant. Celeste's family is not unkind, but they are a world with a specific gravitational pull. And Kofi, my son, who grew up on security I manufactured, fell into that orbit and began, slowly, to reorient himself around it. He started to talk differently. About neighborhoods, about restaurants, about the kinds of people worth knowing. He started to use the word "our crowd" in ways that made its boundaries clear. He started to visit less, not all at once, which would have been noticeable, but gradually, with individually reasonable explanations that accumulated into a pattern I noticed, but initially chose to attribute to the natural busyness of a young married man building his life. I noticed, I filed it, I kept my counsel. And then, he called to tell me he had found a house. He called me on a Sunday morning in October. He was excited, genuinely, fully excited, in the way that I recognized from childhood, the specific register of Kofi when something has happened that he cannot contain. He had found a house, the perfect house, a detached 4-bedroom in a neighborhood that I knew well. I knew it well because I had clients who lived there, because I understood the market dynamics, because I had been watching property in that area for several years with the professional attention of someone who deals in financial strategy. It was a good area, a significantly expensive area, an area where the kind of house he was describing would require a purchase price that I calculated in my head before he finished the sentence. He said Celeste loved it. He said it was exactly the kind of home they had been dreaming of. He said the neighborhood was perfect, the right schools for the future, the right social geography, the right address to put on an invitation. He said, "Mom, it's everything." I said, "How much?" He named the number. It was what I had calculated. I said, "Have you spoken to the bank?" He was quiet for a moment. He said they had looked into mortgages. He said the figures were complicated. He said his income was strong, but his credit history had some issues from a period a few years ago that I was partly aware of and will not detail here. He said Celeste's family had indicated they might be able to help, but had not committed to specifics. He said they were figuring it out. What he was really saying, in the way that children say things to parents they trust, is, "I need help and I don't know how to ask for it directly." I heard it. I have always heard the things Kofi says in the spaces between the words he actually uses. It is one of the specific competencies of being someone's parent for 31 years. I said, "Let me look at the property." He sent me the listing. I looked at it. I had my property solicitor look at it. I had a surveyor look at it. I ran my own analysis of the neighborhood, the price, the comparable sales, the trajectory of the area. Everything confirmed what I already knew. It was a good house, at a fair price, in a strong location. As a property investment, it was sound. As a home for my son and his wife, it was, by any reasonable measure, excellent. I called Kofi back. I said, "I'm going to buy the house." Silence. I said, "In my name, as a property investment, you and Celeste will live there. We'll structure it as a tenancy, a nominal rent, significantly below market, call it a family arrangement. The property appreciates, I retain the asset, you have a home. When the time is right, when your financial position is more stable, when the credit history is cleaner, we can look at a transfer of ownership." He said, "Mom, you don't have to." I said, "I know I don't have to. Do you want me to?" He said yes. He said it quietly and with something in his voice that I recognized as the Kofi who was 4 years old when his father left and looked at me with absolute trust and said, "Is it going to be okay?" And I said yes, and it was because I made it okay. I purchased the house. My name on the deed, a tenancy agreement drawn up properly by my solicitor, signed by Kofi with a monthly figure that was approximately a quarter of the market rate for the area. I paid the full purchase price from a combination of savings and a property investment account I had been building for several years. I did it without fanfare. I did not hold a ceremony. I did not make him thank me in front of anyone. I handed him the keys on a Wednesday afternoon and said, "Look after it." He said, "I will, Mom. I promise." Celeste's family was, as far as I was aware from what Kofi told me, believed the house had been provided by some arrangement involving my finances that Kofi described as family support, which was true in the most technically accurate possible sense, and which Kofi had apparently not seen fit to clarify into specifics. I did not interfere with whatever story he was constructing. It was his life, his marriage, his right to navigate the social geography of his new world in the way he saw fit. What I did not expect was the housewarming call. He called on a Thursday. I was at my desk, reviewing a client portfolio, doing the work that has funded every comfortable thing in Kofi's adult life. He called and said he was having a housewarming party. 2 weeks from Saturday, a proper event, a catered affair, 60 or so guests. He was excited again, but a different kind of excited, a social excitement, the excitement of a person who was about to be seen in a particular way by a particular group of people. He described the guest list, Celeste's family friends, colleagues from the firm, people from the neighborhood they were entering. He described the catering, a company I recognized as expensive. He described the aesthetic. He used the word curated at least twice. And then, after all of that, he said what he had called to say. He said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about the party." I said, "Of course. What time should I arrive?" He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, carefully, in the tone I had identified earlier as the voice he used for things he had decided to do and was hoping I would not make difficult. He said, "That's the thing, Mom. I think it might be better if you didn't come." I said, "Tell me why."
He said the event had a certain tone. He said the guests were a specific kind of people. He said he didn't want me to feel out of place. He said, "It's for our rich friends, Mom. Your presence might make things complicated. It's not your kind of crowd, and I know you wouldn't enjoy it." You wouldn't enjoy it. As though the problem was my potential enjoyment and not his embarrassment at my existence. I said, "When you say complicated, what do you mean exactly?" He said, and I want to be fair, I think he was genuinely trying to deliver this gently, which is a kind of credit I give him even now. He said that Celeste's family had a certain understanding of things, that some of the guests had expectations about the kind of home they were entering and the kind of family behind it, that my being there might create questions he didn't know how to answer. He said, "You're not really... It's a very fancy crowd, Mom. I just think it would be easier for everyone." Not fancy enough. My son, calling me from the house I purchased to tell me I was not fancy enough to attend the party he was throwing in it. I said, very calmly, "I understand." He said he knew I would understand. He said we would celebrate separately. He said all the things he has always said when he has done something he knows requires wrapping. I said good night. I hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time, not crying. I am not a crying woman. I am my mother's daughter, and my mother did not cry. She calculated. I sat and I was very still, and I thought about what I was going to do. And quite quickly, more quickly perhaps than was even necessary, I knew. I called my solicitor. Her name is Margaret. She has handled my property affairs for 9 years, and she is precise and thorough and has an excellent sense of humor about the situations human beings create for themselves with real estate. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you want me to prepare the paperwork?" I said, "Please." She said, "How much back rent do you want to charge?" I said, 12 months at market rate. There was a pause. Then Margaret said, in the specific tone of a woman who thoroughly approves of something, "I'll have it ready by Wednesday." Now, and I want to be clear about this part, because I think it is the part that most reveals who I am and who I chose to be in this situation. I did not plan to ruin his party. I did not plan to arrive in the middle of 60 guests and make a scene. I have never been a scene-making woman. I'm a woman who reads documents and understands leverage and knows the difference between a dramatic gesture and an effective one. What I planned was considerably quieter and considerably more permanent. Margaret prepared the invoice. 12 months of back rent at market rate for a 4-bedroom detached property in that neighborhood, a figure that was, to use the only adequate word, significant. Not ruinous, I did not want to ruin him, but significant in the way that makes a point impossible to dismiss. The invoice was on my letterhead. It was itemized. It was formally correct in every particular. It referenced the tenancy agreement he had signed with my solicitor's office. It was, in every legal and documentary sense, completely real. I also had Margaret prepare something else, a letter, formal, polite, from me as the property owner to the current tenant, noting that as the owner of record, I would be exercising my right to access the property on the date of the housewarming for the purpose of a property inspection. This is a legal right that tenants are subject to with appropriate notice, regardless of whether the tenant is your son or a stranger. I had given appropriate notice. It was documented. I was not going as a guest. I was going as the landlord. I want to pause here, and this is the moment in this story where I want to talk directly to you, because if you are listening to this right now, there's a good chance you are someone who gives and is sometimes made to feel that the giving is invisible. And I want to say something important. If you are enjoying this story, if it is reaching something in you that needed to be reached, please consider subscribing to this channel, because the stories we tell here about dignity, about the quiet power of people who have been underestimated, about mothers and fathers and grandparents who built things that other people stood inside and forgot to look up and see the ceiling, these stories matter. They belong in the world, and your support is what keeps them here. Subscribe. It takes 3 seconds and it means everything. Now let me take you to the party. I had my hair done on the Friday before, not dramatically differently. I am not a dramatic transformation woman, but I wore it the way I wear it when I am going somewhere professional. I chose my outfit with the attention of someone who understands that appearance is a language and intends to be legible. A well-cut suit, deep green, which has always been my color, which my mother said looked like money when worn with confidence. Good shoes, the kind of handbag that people who know anything about handbags recognize and people who don't simply see as a good bag. I did not dress to impress Kofi's fancy friends. I dressed to be exactly who I am when I am being fully myself. I had the invoice in a cream envelope. I drove to the house, my house, on the Saturday evening at 6:15, 30 minutes after the party was scheduled to begin. The house looked beautiful. I will say that without complication. The catering company had done their work. There were lights strung in the garden, tasteful arrangements visible through the front windows, the specific warm glow of a well-lit event in a well-proportioned house. Kofi had taste. He had always had taste. He learned it from watching me, though I suspect he has since reattributed its origin. Cars lined the street, some of them very good cars. A man I did not recognize was managing a drinks table on the front path. He looked at me as I approached. I said, "Good evening." He said, "Good evening, madam." He opened the door. I walked into my house. The entry hall was full of people in the specific social configuration of a successful party, clustered in groups of 3 and 4, glasses in hand, the hum of conversation at the correct volume for an event that is going well. The catering was visible through the archway to the sitting room. The flowers were on the console table. I had specifically chosen that console table. It had been there when I furnished the house before Kofi and Celeste moved in, and I had a brief private moment of noticing it was still exactly where I had placed it. I saw Kofi across the room before he saw me. He was talking to a group, laughing, relaxed, performing the specific ease of a man who is exactly where he wants to be. He looked happy. I noticed that. I tucked it away, not as something to protect, but as something true that deserved to be acknowledged even elsewhere. And then he saw me. The laughter did not stop immediately. It tapered, like music when someone turns a dial. He excused himself from the group, quickly, with the barely controlled urgency of someone managing something he did not anticipate. He crossed the room towards me. He said, in a voice pitched for proximity only, "Mom, what are you doing here? I told you." I said, "Good evening, Kofi. You look well." He said, "Mom, this is not..." I said, I'm not here as a guest. I'm here in my capacity as the property owner. I sent you appropriate notice on Wednesday. Margaret's office has the documentation. I opened my handbag. I took out the cream envelope. I held it towards him. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He said, "What is this?" I said, "Open it." He did not open it immediately. He was aware of the room, of the people nearby, of the social geometry of the moment. He took the envelope. He held it. He said quietly, with the specific quietness of someone trying very hard to control the situation, "Can we do this later? This isn't the time." I said, "I think it's exactly the time. You chose the time when you decided that the house I purchased was a suitable venue for a party to which you did not invite the person who purchased it." He opened the envelope. He read the invoice. I watched his face do the specific thing that faces do when a number that is larger than expected arrives without warning, a kind of recalibration, a moment of purely mathematical processing before the emotional response finds its footing. He looked up. He said, "Mom, this is—" I said, "12 months at market rate. It is all documented in the tenancy agreement you signed, which you have a copy of." He said, "You can't be serious." I said, "I am always serious about property, Kofi. You know this about me." And then, because I am my mother's daughter, and my mother always knew when the right sentence had arrived, I said it, the thing I had decided to say, quietly, without anger, with the complete composure of a woman who has built everything she is standing inside of. "If I'm not fancy enough to be a guest in this house, then you're not rich enough to be my tenant." The room had gone, in the specific radius around us, very quiet. The people nearest, 3 couples, Celeste to my left, who had appeared at some point and was standing with an expression I could not fully read, were still, listening with the particular attention of people who have recognized that something real is happening in their vicinity. Celeste said, "Paulette." I looked at her. I said, "Hello, Celeste. The house looks beautiful. You've done a wonderful job with the styling." She said, I didn't know that Kofi had—" She stopped. She looked at Kofi with an expression that was no longer the expression of a woman at her own party. It was the expression of a woman who was understanding something for the first time. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He said, "What is this?" I said, "Open it." He did not open it immediately. He was aware of the room, of the people nearby, of the social geometry of the moment. He took the envelope. He held it. He said quietly, with the specific quietness of someone trying very hard to control the situation, "Can we do this later? This isn't the time." I said, "I think it's exactly the time. You chose the time when you decided that the house I purchased was a suitable venue for a party to which you did not invite the person who purchased it." He opened the envelope. He read the invoice. I watched his face do the specific thing that faces do when a number that is larger than expected arrives without warning, a kind of recalibration, a moment of purely mathematical processing before the emotional response finds its footing. He looked up. He said, "Mom, this is—" I said, "12 months at market rate. It is all documented in the tenancy agreement you signed, which you have a copy of." He said, "You can't be serious." I said, "I am always serious about property, Kofi. You know this about me." And then, because I am my mother's daughter, and my mother always knew when the right sentence had arrived, I said it, the thing I had decided to say, quietly, without anger, with the complete composure of a woman who has built everything she is standing inside of. "If I'm not fancy enough to be a guest in this house, then you're not rich enough to be my tenant." The room had gone, in the specific radius around us, very quiet. The people nearest, 3 couples, Celeste to my left, who had appeared at some point and was standing with an expression I could not fully read, were still, listening with the particular attention of people who have recognized that something real is happening in their vicinity. Celeste said, "Paulette." I looked at her. I said, "Hello, Celeste. The house looks beautiful. You've done a wonderful job with the styling." She said, I didn't know that Kofi had—" She stopped. She looked at Kofi with an expression that was no longer the expression of a woman at her own party. It was the expression of a woman who was understanding something for the first time and was not pleased about it. I said to both of them, without raising my voice, "I would like to discuss the invoice at a mutually convenient time. I am not here to embarrass anyone. I am here because I own this property and because I believe that the people in a room should know the truth of how the room came to exist." I looked at Kofi. "Your friends deserve to know whose house they are standing in, and so do you, finally, in a way that is real and not convenient." Kofi followed me outside 20 minutes later. The party had resumed. People are resilient in social situations. They find their way back to conversation and drinks because the alternative is standing in awkwardness, and most people prefer movement to awkwardness. Celeste had spoken briefly to 2 couples near the fireplace with a composed, managed expression that I recognized as the face of a woman doing internal work while presenting external stability. I respected it, actually. She is a more capable person than I sometimes gave her credit for. Kofi found me in the garden. I was standing near the rose bed. I had specified rose beds in the landscaping brief. I find roses practical and beautiful in equal measure, which is a combination I admire in most things. He came and stood beside me, and for a moment neither of us said anything. The sounds of the party came through the glass doors behind us, muffled and warm. He said, "I didn't know you were going to do that." I said, "I know." He said, "The envelope. Mom, I don't have—" I said, "I know you don't have it. That was not the point of the envelope." He was quiet. I said, "The point was that you needed to understand something that you have been permitted to not understand for too long, that this house exists because of me, that the comfort you have been presenting to your friends and to Celeste's family as something that simply has a source, and the source is a woman you decided was not fancy enough to attend the party it funded." He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I'm ashamed." I said, "Good. Shame is useful if you do something with it." He said, "Celeste didn't know about the house. I told her the family had helped, but I didn't—" He stopped. "She doesn't know it's in your name." I said, "I know she didn't know. I could see that in her face when she was reading the envelope over your shoulder." He said, "That conversation is going to be your conversation to have, not mine." He looked at me. He said, "Why did you do it? Buy the house. When you knew, when there was already a distance between us that you had noticed, I know you had noticed, why did you still do it?" I thought about that. It was a real question, and it deserved a real answer. I said, "Because I am your mother, and because being your mother is not conditional on you behaving perfectly or seeing me clearly or valuing me correctly at every stage of your life. I bought the house because you needed a home, and I could provide one, and providing it was the right thing to do." I paused. But providing it did not mean accepting that I was invisible. It did not mean agreeing that the woman who makes things possible for you does not deserve a seat at the table, or, in this case, a glass of whatever that catering company is serving. He almost laughed. Almost. It was the ghost of the Kofi Maff, the one I know, the one that starts in the chest. He said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I said, "I know you are, and I love you, and we are going to figure out what comes next. The house, the tenancy, the arrangement. We are going to figure all of it out properly, through proper channels, with documentation, because that is how we do things in this family. But first, I gestured toward the glass doors. "You have 60 guests. Go and be a host." He looked at me for a moment. He said, "Will you stay? As a guest? A real one?" I said, "I'll have one drink, and then I'm going home, because I have a client call in the morning, and I am, in fact, a very busy woman." He nodded. He went inside. I followed him. Celeste met me at the door. She said, "I owe you an apology." I said, "You owe me a conversation. The apology can be part of it, but not tonight." She said, "Not tonight, but soon." I said, "Soon." She handed me a glass of champagne. It was good champagne. I noted it without comment. The invoice was not pursued. I want to be clear about that, because I think the story requires that clarity. I am not a person who punishes people she loves with financial instruments. That is not what the invoice was for. The invoice was a document that said, "This is real. I am real. What I have built is real, and the house you are standing in did not arrive from the air. It arrived from me." The invoice made that visible in the only language that the situation had left me to speak in. Once the language was heard, the invoice had done its work. We restructured the arrangement, properly this time, with a conversation that included Celeste and which was honest in the way that things should have been honest from the beginning. The tenancy continues at a rate we agreed together. The path toward eventual ownership transfer is documented and being worked toward. Celeste's family were informed, by Celeste, to her full credit, of the actual situation. I am told that conversation was interesting. I was not present for it, and did not need to be. What I want to tell you, what I have been building toward through this whole story, is something my mother said to me once, when I was about 12 years old, standing in her market stall on a busy afternoon. A woman had come in and been rude to her, dismissive in the way that some people are dismissive of market traders, as though the person behind the goods is less real than the goods themselves. My mother had served her politely and efficiently, and the woman had left. I asked her why she hadn't said something, why she hadn't defended herself. My mother looked at me with the patience of someone who has been answering the right questions for a long time. She said, "Paulette, I don't need to defend myself. I know what I have. I know what I built. I know what this stall provides and what it has provided and what it will provide. She doesn't need to know that. But I know it, and that is enough, until the day it becomes necessary for her to know it, and then I will show her, clearly, with the receipts." With the receipts. My mother was talking about market invoices. I was, in that garden, talking about a property invoice. The principle is identical. The woman who makes things possible does not always need to announce herself. She maintains her records. She keeps her documentation. She builds and provides and shows up and does the work. And when the moment comes, when the person she has been building for forgets, temporarily or substantially, who has been holding the structure up, she shows them, clearly, with the receipts. I am 61 years old. I came from Accra. I built a career in a country that did not save me a space. I raised a son alone. I bought properties and managed portfolios and ran a business from a spare bedroom that is now an office with 3 people in it and a client list that would surprise the people at my son's party who looked at my shoes and thought they understood what they were looking at. I am not fancy. I am not interested in fancy. I am interested in solid, documented, properly structured, real things. things that compound over time and hold their shape under pressure and are still standing after the performance has moved on to the next room. I am the receipts. If you are listening to this right now, if you are a parent who has given everything and been made to feel like a background character in the story your giving made possible, I want to say this to you directly. You are not the background. You are the architecture. You are the load-bearing wall that everyone is leaning on without knowing they are leaning. You do not have to announce it every day. You do not have to make it loud, but you are allowed to know it. You are allowed to walk into the room that your effort built and stand in it with your shoulders back and hand someone a cream envelope and say very quietly and very clearly, I am the reason this room exists. And if that is not fancy enough for them, then they are not rich enough for you. Thank you, fully, completely, from every part of what I am, for listening to every single word of this story. If it reached somewhere real in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are not already subscribed to this channel, please do it now. Press subscribe, because every story we tell here is for the women and men who build things quietly, who hold structures up without being thanked, who show up with receipts when everyone else has forgotten the original transaction. Those stories deserve to be heard. Your subscription makes sure they are. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what you have built that someone has been standing inside without seeing you. Tell me about your receipts. I will be reading. I always am.